Greetings, my name is Michael Miller. This is a Michael Miller trademark training video out to you because you're watching. Thank you and welcome. It's meant for Michael Miller Pilates licensed affiliates, licensed presenters, the Core New Core, my patrons. Thank you, my patrons. You know who you are. And anyone interested in surviving and thriving as a Pilates instructor or student. Within my notes came the comment, requires imagination. And because I didn't know where to stick it, it's part of another title, I just gave it its own place at top. Requires imagination. So there's three things on my list today, and they're simple and direct, and I hope make a point that number one is that gonna never gets here. Gonna is a contraction of going to, what you are going to do, what you're gonna do, and so often the distinction between being a teacher and being an instructor isn't clear in one's mind, if you're trying to be an instructor, about the difference between engaging in thinking versus engaging in instructing. A common interaction in an instructor is to fall into what's going to happen. You're going to lay on your back, you're going to bend your knee, you're going to lift your head, you're going to do whatever, and gonna never gets here, meaning you're talking about the future. You're thinking about not what's not in the moment, but what's going to happen. And so I've made a whole imaginary fortune on asking instructors to, every time they hear themselves say the word gonna, that they owe me a nickel. Right? That the word gonna costs a nickel. And I've had interesting feedback. Positively so. And it helps emphasize this difference between teaching and thinking and instructing and doing. As an instructor, when you say lift your head, bend your knee, lower your back, right, that's being an instructor. And to the extent that you lean into or indulge in or only come from description of what's going to happen, it's so less than what could be if you participated more in the moment by being more of an instructor than a teacher. Number two, to me it seems like a big deal. Core new tension in the body, oppositional rotation between the axes in the body that have the ability to create that tension. Pointing that out, to me, seems like a big deal. To others, not so much. What brings that up is two things from social media recently. One where someone is using a stick to help find alignment in the body, like along the spine. In seeking alignment by tactily making something sensational like the stick is much better than than not having any connection to it at all, right? But the contact externally as a point of reference for lining up can be sought internally as well. And internally is within your imagination of knowing how to make core tension, and in so doing, making tension, you get a sensation of alignment. Because you achieve a higher, a closer state of alignment. From the tension, you become more aligned. That makes sense, right? And then the ballerina, a beautiful image of a ballerina that was in much more extension than what I'm about to show you. But the position of the neck and the head, right? The head was in a place, and it was congruent with the rest of the body. There was something about it where it belonged where it did. And to me, there is the engagement of core tension as part of where the body is and why it is where it is. Specifically, the head in this case, and the neck, and how it's held. You may find that intuitively. You may be gifted with that without ever needing an explanation of what you're doing when you do that. But those that don't have initially perhaps the ability to engage in that kind of muscular interaction between two different axes in their body, like the ears and the shoulders, there's what you learn or know intuitively, and there's everything that what people make out of that by word of mouth, which is folklore, by definition. And theory, by definition, is an attempt at an explanation. Like Darwin's theory of evolution, I'm broadcasting Michael Miller's theory of Pilates. It's an attempt at an explanation that doesn't exist and isn't welcome within the folklore. To me, for you, one scoop of folklore and one scoop of theory will serve you very well in your confidence calling yourself a Pilates instructor. Just my opinion. Because you'll not only have whatever else you know, even if you knew Joe, you're listening to this and you're still alive, and you knew Joe, and there's a whole lineage beneath you. There are fewer than that I can say that about now. MMP is a POV that comes from a theory, not having known Joe, but just based on what he wrote in his book. And by what he wrote in his book, 55 years later, you get to a definition of what seems to be ideal within Joe's book. His definition is promised in a sequence within his book. You get to a definition of the ideal. I do. That's what the definition seeks to do is to define the ideal that exists right there in Joe's book. How did I get off on this? Oh, the ballerina and the position of the head. And coronary tension is a big deal because it recognizes the body's effort to ideally engage. I mean, its effort to move is one thing, but its effort to utilize itself as a human being that has a body in the space of physics, right? When you go aiming for number 2, contrology develops the body uniformly, that comes right out of Joe's book. Number 1, Joe defines his method. The very next paragraph, Joe explains how it does what it does. And it does it, contrology develops the body uniformly, comma, more to the sentence. But in MMP, seeking an ideal, the acknowledgement that Pilates is whole body, and that matters and that's important, got me to recognizing this mountain of recognition that coronary tension is real, and biomechanically how the body engages itself to move through space. And always what comes off of, in terms of what two great things do you get from coronary tension? You get more uniform usage of your body. You get more uniformly engaged in your effort, which makes you lighter in space, which comes in handy when you're trying to move through space. So this means like you got more muscle going on, more uniform effort. Everything is participating. Now, how do you do that? I think it has to come from tension. And the way you create tension is by having a grip that create that tension. And going into this grip and going into this grip, the combination of those grips presses apart from one another. Just like the combination between the shoulders and the ears presses apart from one another. And I'm just pointing to the fact of the biomechanics that the body is engaging in to move through space. Coronary tension distributes the load of your body as efficiently as you're going to get to do it as a human being for the way you're built. Just meaning given the endpoints of tension that you have between your ears, shoulders, hips, knees, ankles, and metatarsals, within the MMP point of view, is knowing how to connect the dynamics between those endpoints of tension. An endpoint is just the end of the axis. So here's a long line, it's an axis. But the end of it is the endpoint. And so there, in Michael Miller's trademark, that points to what exists in the body, not saying there's not other stuff and can't be looked at other ways, but within the POV of MMP, you've got the body orchestrating rotational dynamics within itself. And those axes of rotation, this is a grip across the whole width of the body. And it's the width of the grip and the strength and the integrity of your control of that axis that is the foundation of your stability and your movement through space. Number 3. I see a friend of mine on Facebook teaching a group of people with lying down on one side close to a springboard so that they can go, in a lateral plane or on their side, and they can go up and down with the leg, foot attached to a strap, attached to a spring that comes from the springboard. And my number 3 comment is that within the MMP point of view, you inhale as you move away from center. Pilates is eccentric in a lot of ways, and to me, one of the ways it's eccentric is that inspiration is literally the inspiration for movement. Now, just generally speaking, and from a point of view and an artistic use of words and metaphor, I don't mean to be too literal. But indeed, as a tactic in pursuing my movement, I intentionally trigger instinctual inspiration when I'm really after it, because I try to exhaust my expiration, waiting for and riding upon that organic need to breathe in that comes from life seeking itself. Exhaling is an expiration to where you say that someone expired, they're done breathing, and they're dead. See the difference? The point that I would at least encourage is do it both ways. Do it both ways. And especially know the difference in that philosophically the inhale that starts and comes from the core and moves out from there to initiate the effort and support the load that the spring is a part of. The inhale taking you away from center, and the exhale returning you. Try that. Try both ways. So imagination requires, that was my title that I started with. And that came to that it seems like a big deal in the terms of seeking alignment and looking for it externally rather than being able to reach for it internally. And the way you do that is with your imagination. And that became, it's like, imagination. It requires imagination. Core new tension requires imagination. And the interest in embracing it when and how you feel like, how you feel like it. In Pilates, in a Pilates studio, to me it's so much an expression of the biology's respect for the physics that it's moving around in. And an appreciation for attitude. Not just in your behavior, but that your body's attitude as a spaceship in space. And as such, its relationship to the space it's in, and for the biological unit that it is, with eyes and nose and mouth all on one side of the face, going this way. Direction matters. Midline on the plumb bob. That's from Alan. Says so much in just a few words. And then your ability to control your movement, it respecting not only gravity, but an orientation within gravity. The emergence of life is when movement shows up on the stage of life, of reality, on the stage of reality, it shows up in a spiral. And the human being is this explosion of a spiral that expanded its capability of creating rotational dynamic beyond just one axis, but to two. So it brings me to symmetrical and how important symmetrical is as a pursuit in the performance of Pilates, and that if you entertain asymmetrical, it's not standing closer to your target, but hoping to improve your aim of symmetrical by exploring asymmetrical. The target's symmetrical. The shell speaks for itself. The human body speaks for itself. Imagination of the physics that's involved in how you engage yourself to move through space. And then recently it's been the subject of imagination and knowledge. The two things I'm trying to broadcast, while I can, and enjoying the hell out of it, is pointing to this identification of core new tension. And to me it's a big deal, and maybe not to most or anybody else, but it's what was I going to say? Oh, it's from that. It's from seeing right there in social media somebody attaching a pole to somebody's back to help them feel alignment. Right? That's a contact point from an external stimulus, like doing the wall. Right? But there's more. See, when you can imagine core new tension, you can achieve what you're after, alignment, internally, and have a sensation of it that's not coming from externally. To me, that's a big deal. Moving away from center. Inhale as you go out away from center. Exhale as you return home. And then you have knowledge about core new tension. And what that knowledge is about is being able to imagine core new tension as a means to engaging your body. Now, someday, maybe that will have more value than now, and my email list has become a second skate to my broadcast. And the last email I sent was about, well, the one before that was about the offer, about on a sheet of paper, making an offer to make a presentation that explains CT and MMP. That lasts this long, fill in the blank. The last time I said was 10 minutes. For this much money, the last time I said $10, paid in advance. Well, actually, I just left that a PayPal way to pay. Which takes me to a planned email, if I get that far, would be the back of that, or the other side of that offer, would be all the ways you could pay. You know, if it's pay in advance, you know, how many, you know, then I don't have cash, or I don't have my credit card, or I don't have this or that, or whatever, okay. But when you turn it over, I plan to make the point that in the future of commerce and in having the ability to accept income streams towards you, then there's nothing to inhibit how big of an income stream that can be and how much control over it you have, because it's direct. Just saying. What I can while I can't, because life can't live forever. Read between the lines and see behind the curtain. You know, connect the dots. Evaluate points of view. Be able to make a distinction between what you're learning as folklore that comes without explanation, and that explanation is just a different flavor of ice cream to folklore, and the ice cream is knowledge. Know how to make an offer to add 2 and 2. Direct your thinking and Geist.